That's right. Check this out.
Go.
Oh, what is that doing that? No, stop now. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Sundowner for Monday the 5th of June. We've got a few days to catch up on here, but I'm going to play it by ear. I do have quite a few clips to play, and I have a fair bit of background noise. So I'll start off as normal, but if it does get too noisy, I will change it out and I'll throw all the videos in and we'll call it for there. So let's see how we go. You are all more than welcome to come and join our Telegram group. That's where all of this comes from. Every single thing that we show in these dailies are all posted over there, and a heck of a lot more. So some new, some old, some general interest, but it's well worth. If you are on Telegram, come and join us, and if you're not, I would seriously think about it, guys. So here we go. What on earth have I got here? Okay. This comes from, sorry, I had to think about that. This comes from basically a follow-up to an article that we played last week. An article that we played last week. Now, we've all seen the censorship that's happened on the big platforms, a la Twitter. We've seen our channels get taken down. We've seen everyone's channels get taken down when you dare to speak about what's going on in the world and have an opinion on it. Wind, can you give me a minute, please? Thank you. So this is one that was posted. I'm not going to try and read the article. Basically, it's been noted that Australia is involved in this, and in requesting that things that go against the narrative are removed, reduced, people get banned, and so on. So that's where this comes from. Next one up. Oh yeah, this is an interesting one. All right, let me share the screen out. Holy crap. You've done well, Wobbles. And hello. And Yui, Neil, Aussie. Yeah, cute Yui. I'll try. I will try. All right, let me pull this up. Too many screens open and one hit. Here we go. All right. So, New York City-based musician known as The Dare is facing backlash for using children in disturbing cover for the new album The Sex that contains lyrics about girls, sex, and drugs. I have issues with that whole entire headline. Okay. And it gets worse. A New York-based indie sleaze musician has been accused of glamorizing pedophilia with a provocative album cover showing models who appear to be children in sexual poses. Harrison Patrick Smith, 27 years old, records as The Dare. As recently as December, he was working as a substitute teacher at a private school in the West Village. In April, he signed to a label, Republic Records, a division of the Universal Music Group. Smith's debut EP, The Sex, was out on the 12th of May, and its cover features two young girls who seem to be children. Both are dressed in girlish clothes. One, in what looks like a school sports kit, is being bent over by a man, while the other, in a grey pleated school-style skirt, straddles a man laying on his back. Now, I won't read the rest of this. Again, the dailies are not for the in-depth stuff that we cover on the other channels. This is just to give you an idea of what's going on out there. To be honest, that's all I've got. I'm going to take that off the screen now, because when I first saw that, it infuriated me. It really did. All right, next up. Hopefully you can all see this. Because I think this says it all. How you going, Dan? Good to see you, man. Yeah, hopefully you can see this all. Basically, we've got to stop this shit reaching the kids. Oh, and why don't my pictures come up? Oh, that's right, because I didn't bring it in. Okay, I'll play the last one, and then I'll try and bring the pictures across for you.
Kaya nga. Kapag hindi natapat din sa sensor niya.
Ang lalim pa.
Parang oo.
To me, that is pure evil. And yet, every time we buy anything mass produced, that's kind of where they take it. So, I got nothing. I really had nothing. That one actually made me cry. Yeah. And I didn't get to find any other two pieces that I've got there. I'll find it as I go. All right. This is one. So everybody's doing the call outs. This is about what's happening in our local areas. Port Macquarie is up next. As of Friday, there is a, what's it called? At Art Walk on Friday the 9th of June, we will colourfully celebrate arts and diversity, including drag queen appearances around the event. So anybody who is close enough, anybody who has contacts there, it's their turn to make a stand. The only way we're going to have a chance of beating any of this is to consistently harass these twat waffles who are promoting it. So that's it. Hey guys, Chris, auditing, good to see us. All right, that one I'm going to come back to because that's a 20 odd minute clip, but it's very well worth watching. So I will play that one in full. Okay, fresh out this morning over in the US in Washington, DC, there was a very large explosion that has been explained away as a sonic boom. The weird bit is the claim originally, and I'll paraphrase here, and again, it's all over in the group. I'll paraphrase here. It comes about there are military approved exercises happening offshore, but at the same time, a small Cessna took off from an inland state, headed out to Long Island, didn't land, turned around and went back. So jets were scrambled. The small plane subsequently crashed, and there's been not much come out of that and no photo evidence. Excuse me, no, stop now. Down. Sorry, child being a pain in the ass. The whole thing seemed sketchy. It did from the start. There's been reports that the scrambled jets spotted the pilot who appeared to be unconscious, and yet there's no evidence of that. And the sonic boom the explosion was explained away as a sonic boom. Well, there's reports from places as far away as within a 50-mile radius that it shook the ground. So that's still an ongoing dig. We're not too sure exactly what's going on. It was just weird. It really was weird. There's another one of the weird. No, this is one of the fucked up ones. And I agree with you. Excuse me, you were told no. Please stop. Thank you. This is another one of the ones that, yeah, I agree with the OP. The comment is, I try to accept everyone, but I don't approve of this, and I'm afraid neither do I. I had a few more in reserve that I could have added to this thread, and no, it just doesn't need to be glorified. It really doesn't. These people have a mental disorder. This one, I'm not going to play the clip. I've got it here so I can drop it in chat. Copy and paste. I had a conversation over on the page about this. They said get our asses kicked for sure. Hence the reason why it's not publicised on YouTube. But the Indigenous New Zealanders, Maoris, are teaming up with Dr. Formite, and they're going hard after him. So best of luck to them, and we'll bring news in as it comes in as to how they're going with it. They need to follow the path, and they need to make it public. Well, we all do, but yeah. Oh, come on. Work with me now. Okay, this is a poem, and again, I've got it here mainly to show, not to sit and read. This is a bit of an uplifting one, so yeah, go and check out the channel. Next up, the banking issues. Oh, good grief. Anybody with a spanner, can you knock that one fair on the head, please? Yeah, banking issues. So Westpac, we've seen ANZ with their compliance with the bullshit. Westpac, and I've got the next slide is the same. Westpac are also limiting what you can do with your banking, with your funding, reducing daily withdrawals and transaction limits, which is interesting. It's extremely interesting. Here you go, man. Come on, work with me. So there's also that goes with it, and these both came in at the same couple of hours. The other thing that they are doing is limiting allowable transactions to areas under economic sanctions. So anybody who goes to buy something on any platform that may originate in somewhere that's currently under sanctions, say, I don't know who, say Russia, for instance. It's a shame. Not even touching that one. Not even touching that one. Anyone, yeah. So if you want to buy something that happens to come from Russia, they will refuse the transaction. You will not be allowed to fulfill the purchase, which is a new thing. I've never had a purchase refused, and I haven't bought anything online for quite some time, but yeah, that is new. I haven't seen those terms and conditions in anything from any bank. Mad, yes, you can actually increase that, and depending on the actual bank account, it's a tricky one because we don't really know the end result of that. You know, we haven't got anybody who's been out and tried it. So that'll be an interesting test to see what happens. All right, next up, I'm going to play get rid of that. All right, I'm going to play a 10-minute clip for you guys, and then I shall return when I find it. Here we go. I'll add
on leave and banned from entering their workplace because they do not want to get the jab. Joining us now to discuss this is the founding director of the Australian Firefighters Alliance, Steve McDonald. Steve, great to see you. This is just weird. I mean, you can't work. Tell us about your own personal story and the others that you represent.
Well, thank you, Rowan. Look, I'm here because myself, Jason, Josh from Ballarat, Dan from Queensland, and JUN and Tony, firefighters with over 200 years professional firefighter experience, made a decision back in November 21 that we did not want to take the jab. And
As is your right. Yep.
None of us could have believed that fast forward to June 2023, we would still be here unable to work as professional firefighters in New South Wales or Victoria.
And why, when we saw a big fire in Sydney last week, it's not as if fires have stopped. So what do your bosses or those in control say to you? Sorry, go away, we're not interested?
They say it's a health issue, it's a workplace issue. But
well, hang on. Let's just hear the Chief Health Officer, the Chief Medical Officer of Australia, the person behind all the mandates, all the social restrictions, all the lockdowns, the one who was giving the leading medical advice. Here's what he had to say in Parliament this week.
I think at this stage in the pandemic, there's little justification for vaccine mandates. We have a highly vaccinated population.
Little justification for vaccine mandates. Why are your bosses telling you that you can't work? And more importantly, that Australian lives are at risk. People will die in fires because 200 years of experience is missing from the firefighters.
That is a great question, Ron. In Victoria, unvaccinated volunteers are allowed back to stations. At those same stations, the paid firefighters are allowed to volunteer at their own station. We won't pay you. That's Victoria. In New South Wales, on May the 13th, we had an open day for anyone in the public, regardless of your status, to come in, meet the firefighters in your community. I was allowed to go there with my children, spend the whole day there without any questions asked, yet I couldn't turn up 2 days later onto my rostered shift and work as a firefighter, put on my uniform.
This is disgusting.
In New South Wales, we've got a new government now. Has there been any indication that anything is going to change under the new Minns government?
Well, James, you and I spoke about this the other night on Chris Kenny. Chris Minns, sadly, has been silent. He was a retained firefighter in New South Wales before he became a politician. A lot of people don't know that. He was one of us. He has anecdotally lent his support to firefighters across New South Wales, yet he wouldn't take any of my calls. He hasn't used his platform to influence and suggest to the fire commissioner in New South Wales, this is lunacy. We want the best fire service that we can have. Bring them back to work.
Rita?
How does the logic work in Victoria if you can volunteer?
Correct.
But if you want to be on the roster and get paid, then you're a health risk. But if you're volunteering, doing precisely the same thing for free, you're not a health risk. I mean, on the face of it, it's absurd. Is there nowhere you can take this in? There's not Fair Work Commission or somewhere you can take this grievance?
You can bet, Rita, we've taken it everywhere. We've spoken to the senators in Canberra. The AFA was invited to Parliament House in Canberra. We've been to the New South Wales Parliament, and Anne-Marie Hermans, who you may know as the Shadow Minister for Emergency Services, took that very issue and looked at the Emergency Services Minister in the face in Victorian Parliament and said, please explain. She had nothing to say for the Victorian fireys who were out of work.
So, Steve, does it go beyond firefighters? What other areas?
Look,
I know there are police officers, there are...
As you can imagine, Rowan, I've been in this space for 2 years.
Yeah.
My colleagues are John Larter, the paramedic who took on Brad Hazard. Roland Crystal, 35 years, now retired because he didn't want to enter into this madness, police officer in New South Wales. Educators, childcare workers, Graham Hood, the pilot, hospitality workers like Brad Hill, the publican at the Singleton Caledonian Hotel. We know one another because we are the ones who've been put in this position of discrimination and victimisation for so long. but it's the public and the community that are literally being discriminated against without them even realising it.
And so you're still being paid, but you're not allowed to work. So the taxpayers.
No. I need to clarify that.
Tell us about that.
Firefighters were stood down without pay.
Okay.
We were told you can go on your own holiday pay. Won't that be nice? You can take your long service leave. We won't pay you. And for me, 22 years in the service, I've been able to hold on. But fireys who were, say, 5 years in the job, they had no long service leave. They exhausted their leave. They exhausted their leave entitlements 12 months ago.
And so what are those people doing?
Other jobs, trying to pay their mortgages, trying to feed their families, trying to put their children through school.
And in those other jobs, they don't need any sort of jab requirement, even if they are, as in, firefighting, coming into contact with members of the public.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, the police dropped their mandate on the 1st of June. Firefighters and AMBOs and police, historically and currently, we turn out together all the time. How does that work? You can have unvaccinated police now working, but the firefighters are allowed to work. The virus magically become less virulent at the Queensland border?
See, Steve,
or the South Australian border?
Here on Outsiders, we like to have solutions, and the solution is here for you, which is garlic, apparently. Garlic is the new cure for COVID, apparently. So had you just taken some garlic all along? I know I'm being flippant, but this is the absurdity of the COVID regime, that we have a situation, you can't work. So many people can't work. Those services are needed. We need firefighters. We need paramedics. We need police officers. We need doctors and nurses. They can't work.
Are they requiring the firefighters to have boosters every few months, or is it just the 2 shots?
Wow, Rita, you brought that up, because the irony is when we asked for the reason why this would be the case back in December 21, we were told, it's not our decision. We're relying on the WHO, New South Wales government, ATAGI, TGA. Our fire services stopped following ATAGI advice in May 2022. They don't follow it anymore, yet they keep their policies in place in a punitive way with no justification.
Yeah, because if you haven't had your boosters, really, I mean,
it's
if you're going to follow
insanity.
This philosophy, at least be consistent with it.
Well,
they're not even consistent.
ATAGI would say, Brendan Murphy would say that there's no difference between those who took the 2 shots back in December 21 and the unvaccinated firefighter who, for whatever personal reasons, said no, is still not allowed to work.
And many of them probably have had COVID and some form of natural.
Listen, Steve, great. Thank you so much for coming on Outsiders today. I hope we can do something to help, because this madness has to stop. There have to be some politicians with the guts to stand up in government and say all this craziness has to stop. Steve McDonald, thanks so much for coming on. Good luck with your fight, with this particular fight, and it'll be good to get you back out there doing what you should be fighting, which is fires.
Rowan, on behalf of myself and all these other industry workers, can we thank, Sky News has pretty much been the only mainstream media channel who has listened to and taken seriously the plight of fireys, AMBOs, police and all those industries. And we thank you for that, because without that assistance, I don't think the public would wake up to the fact that this is still an issue. So thank you.
Gratefully received. Thanks, Steve. Terrific.
That was an interesting one. Good grief. I do apologise. Hate it when this happens. Yeah. It's an interesting one, because there's so many industries that are still under the so-called rules that's completely invalid to start with. So the fallout, if it happens, when it happens, is going to be pretty massive. And at least these guys have got the balls to stand up and argue the point. Well, they've got the lawyers behind them as well. Yes, thank you, Mad. I know I've got a fair bit of wind in the background, so hence the reason I'm playing the videos. All right, next and the last video for today, and this is the last of today, is going to be a replay of a redacted clip. The fellow that they're talking to, Scott Ritter, I have watched a fair bit of his work, and he's pretty much on point. So I'll throw that up there, and I'll see you all in chat.
Since the beginning of this war, Putin has responded with strikes in the heart of Ukraine's intelligence service, and Ukraine is trying to fast track its membership into NATO. Are we at a turning point in this war? Where are we right now? Let's ask former UN weapons inspector and former U.S. Marine Scott Ritter. Scott is back on the show. Great to see you, Scott. You just returned from Russia, and I just got to ask you, I mean, I was following your travels there on social media a little bit for a month. You know, everyone says, well, you know, Russia is being destroyed with sanctions. It's a shell of its former self. I'm sure the grocery stores are empty. People are starving. Putin is dying of cancer. What is the truth? What did you see when you were in Russia?
Well, I can't address any issues pertaining to Vladimir Putin's health. I didn't meet him. So I don't
right.
know.
He's got kidney failure. There's a long list of things that apparently that, you know, the West loves to say that he's dying of. So, yeah,
you know, for a dying man, I would tell you his presence in Russia is very vigorous and vibrant. He travels a lot. He speaks a lot. He's a visible leader. So if this is what a dying man looks like, then I think Russians will want him to keep dying for a long time, because he's alive and well and living and leading, and that's the important thing. He's leading, and the Russians recognize him as their leader. You know, we speak of the war and the military aspects of this conflict, and I guess we'll touch on that in a second. But you know, Clausewitz, Sun Tzu, and other famous military supposed to. This war, first of all, was provoked by the West. I think everybody needs to understand that this was not a war that Russia wanted. Russia was provoked into this war. It's a provocation that's been going on since 1992. In 2008, the exact consequences of trying to invite NATO or Ukraine into NATO were set forth in writing by William Burns. He's the current CIA director, former U.S. ambassador, and he said straight up, if you invite Ukraine into NATO, you will set in motion events that will lead to a Russian military intervention. He wrote that in early 2008. In November 2008, Ukraine was invited. So the West has been provoking this military intervention for some time now. But the idea was that the military intervention would trigger sanctions that would destroy Russia. You see, it wasn't that the West was going to defeat Russia militarily or that Ukraine was going to defeat Russia. The idea was to hold Russia militarily until the economy collapsed, and then create a sort of Moscow Maidan movement to replicating the 2014 coup d'etat that evicted Viktor Yanukovych. That was the goal. That was the objective. Newsflash, it has failed miserably. I arrived in Novosibirsk, the third largest city in Russia, the largest growing economy in Russia. There is so much investment taking place right now, foreign investment, internal investment. I don't think the people who planned the sanction campaign understand the reality of Russian economy. By sanctioning, for instance, the Russian oligarchs, and taking their money from them. One, it was one of the most welcome moves by the Russian people. They applauded the West for doing that, because for decades, the Russian people and the Russian government had been angered by the flight of Russian capital out of Russia by these oligarchs who steal money from the Russians and then take it abroad. So the Russians applauded this. But by locking the Russian oligarch class out of Western investment possibilities, there are now literally $1 trillion or plus of capital waiting to be invested, and these people have no choice but to invest it in Russia.
Wow.
And so they are pouring money into Russia. You know, a year ago during the pandemic, in the post-pandemic environment, um, the planners for Russian urban areas were looking for capital. They didn't have enough money. I mean, they were building, but there were so many projects to do, so they had to allocate their resources carefully. They're in a situation now where they don't know how to spend the money. There is so much money available right now that they are literally funding projects that otherwise would not have been funded. You can't go anywhere in a major urban environment in Russia without seeing cranes taking place, buildings going up, and these buildings are already allocated in terms of the workspace. Companies are flooding into Russia from around the world. Newsflash, America and Europe, you ain't the only players in town. In fact, you're nobody compared to the rest of the world. The rest of the world, the global south, India, Pakistan, Iran, China are coming into Russia, investing. There has been no pause whatsoever. Russia is accelerating right now. Russia is the healthiest it has been ever. In its
Wow.
entire history, Russia has never been this healthy economically. You know, when I go around the United States, there's these little joke stickers, because Joe Biden, of course, is infamously, called everything that's happened wrong in America Putin's tax. Putin did this, Putin did that, Putin did that. And yet people mocked it because they, you get to the gas station, you have high Oprah, and there's these little stickers with Joe Biden saying, I did this,
Right.
pointing at it.
Right.
I have to tell you that the standing joke right now in Russia is thank you, Joe Biden.
Wow.
Thank you, Joe Biden, because they are literally looking at it saying, do you not understand what you have done? You have made this economy, this Russian economy, so vibrant, so vigorous. Is it perfect? No, it's not a utopia. The Western media will always be able to go out and find little chinks in the armor and say, aha, what about this? What about that? What about this? Guys, you're missing the big picture. The big picture is Russia is alive, well, living, thriving. There are no empty shelves in Russia. No empty shelves in Russia. Prices in Russia are ridiculously low. When people say, Russia's GDP matches that of, Italy or whatever, guys, you're missing the point. Purchasing power. The ruble is, because prices are so low and inflation's so low, you get more bang with the ruble than you do with the buck. And so even though on paper it may not look like the Russians make as much was creating the condition where Vladimir Putin was compelled to partially mobilize, the 300,000 people that he mobilized back in September. Sent a panic through the non-believers. When I say non-believers, I mean the people that didn't support Putin, the Navalny supporters. Around 300, 400,000 of them fled Russia, much to the glee of the West. You know what Russia did? They opened the doors and said, go. And you literally got rid of all the empty baggage. All of the dead weight in Russian society is gone, and the Russians are ecstatic because they don't have to deal with these people who hate Putin, who hate Russia from their perspective. You ran away from your country when your country needed you. There are many people that I worked with in Russia during this trip who are not Putin supporters. I will tell you that straight up. They support Russia and Putin is the leader, so they're not going to turn their back on him, but they have questions. They have a lot of questions, and at some point in time, Putin will be called upon to answer these questions. But when Russia needed them, they are there, they stayed, they are loyal, they are patriotic, and that is the nation right now. They're not a bunch of chest-thumping USA fake American patriots, sunshine soldiers who are patriotic, but they don't do anything. These are Russians who are stoic, and they are there. They are working. This is not a defeated nation. This is a nation that's in it for the long haul, and they have a vision that's far greater than anything anybody in the West has been able to articulate about what their vision towards Russia is. Russia is thinking beyond Ukraine. Ukraine is a big topic. Russia's working that issue. It's frustrating for many Russians that it's taken this long to solve the issue. But the Russians are also looking beyond Ukraine. They're looking towards a world where Russia is part of a multipolar community that the United States no longer directs. The United States is invited to the table, but the day and age of America telling people what to do is over, finished, and that's clear in Russia today.
Yeah, it's clear, of course, with the 30 new additional countries that want to join the BRICS nations as well. It's sunsetting on the U.S. dollar, as we've been covering here on this show. You were there then in Russia when that drone strike hit the Kremlin, hit the Capitol. At the time, of course, Zelensky came out, gave a speech, said we had nothing to do with that. The United States now says they did. Of course, we've been saying before that they don't do anything without NATO's supervision or involvement in any of this. So it was all a joke to begin with. And then overnight, or the past 48 hours, we've seen a swarm of drones hitting Moscow. They say, of course, that those the defense Russian Ministry of Defense says they were all taken care of. A few of them hit residential buildings, though. So when you were there among the people and hearing their response, were they stunned that, oh my gosh, now Moscow is now under attack?
No. Look, the Russians know that they're at war. That strike on the Kremlin took place, I believe, on May 3rd, in the lead up to Victory Day. And let me just give you another thing. In America and in Europe, they sell Victory Day, May 9th, as some sort of Putin-generated propaganda exercise, where Red Square is filled with the loyalists, and there's a lot of made-for-TV moments. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, watching this show, Victory Day is real. It's a real Russian holiday. And it's a Russian holiday that resonates with every single Russian, because 27 million Soviets died during World War II at the hands of Nazi Germany. There's not a family in Russia that didn't suffer the harshest possible consequences of that conflict. They look to the sky because they know in their hearts that their grandparents, their parents, their relatives are looking down on them, holding them to account for what they do in honor of the sacrifice that was made. This is part of the Russian soul. And that's the other thing I learned on this trip is, in the West, we mock the Russian soul. We hear people say that, we dismiss it. It's real. It resonates. It defines Russia. It is who the Russian people are. So anybody who thought that you could launch a drone strike on Moscow on May 3rd and somehow panic the Russians into doing something, on May 9th, the actual day of the parade, Moscow was struck, I believe, by 9 to 12 drones. You didn't hear about it, but it was there. The drone attack came in. The Russians shot down most of them. It's an issue. Are the Russians frustrated by this? Yes. Would they like perfect air defense? Yes. But these drones are slow, they're low flying, they're hard to detect, and they're just a mosquito bite. It's a propaganda exercise. But the Russians aren't losing sight. This is a nation that is committed to victory, not victory just in Ukraine, but victory against the collective West. And a handful of drone strikes are not going to change any aspect of that. What it has done is liberated the Russian leadership to start taking out what they call decision-making centers. And ask the Ukrainians how that feels. They just lost their military intelligence headquarters. They lost it. It's gone. Everybody in that building is dead. They will lose other decision-making centers if these strikes continue to escalate.
Do we know if NATO? This is, of course, we heard reports months ago of major attacks after the last round of these style attacks, where Putin launched on these decision-making centers, a bunker outside of Kiev, specifically being hit with NATO decision makers in there. Do we know? Are these just Ukrainians? Are they NATO as well? U.S. intelligence that we won't hear about that are also hitting these attacks? Anything you know about that?
Well, I think the number that was put out on the previous one, which I think took place near Lvov in Western Ukraine, was 200 to 300. Now, that's just a ridiculously high number. If you take a look at the documents that were leaked by this airman in Massachusetts, the documents acknowledge that there are boots on the ground. Over, I think, 100 Americans are on the ground. Most of them rotate in and out of Ukraine. Many of them work out of the embassy. Is it possible that Americans or NATO designated personnel are in these bunkers? Yes, that is a possibility. But to put 200 to 300 is ridiculous. One, in this day and age of connectivity, real-time connectivity, you don't need to go through that risk. You can keep these people in Poland and maintain the connectivity with the Ukrainians without putting these people at risk. So while I do believe that there have been casualties and there are some credible reports coming out about casualties, I think the casualties that are taking place are on personnel that are providing critical logistics support. Billions of dollars of military equipment has been provided to the Ukrainians. This is a logistical nightmare, a maintenance nightmare, and an accounting nightmare. And so I think you have NATO resources pushed forward to support this logistical effort, not planning for the battle that's taking place outside of Ukraine. But there have to be people on the ground to assist Ukraine in dealing with the basically the mountain of logistical support requirements that have been accrued because of this. And I think these are the people that have suffered casualties. And I do believe that there have been dead, and I do believe there have been wounded on the part of active duty NATO personnel. Whether or not this includes Americans, I can't say.
Victoria Nuland last week admitted that for the past 4 to 5 months, the United States has been actively involved in the planning process of this counteroffensive, despite New York Times reports, despite Politico reports that say they're frustrated because Ukraine just won't share any information about their spring offensive, their summer offensive, which we found laughable here on this show. And Victoria Nuland then confirmed that the United States, NATO, has been actively involved in this spring offensive planning for 4 to 5 months. She said this publicly. So where are we with this offensive? What do you think we're going to see as we see these little pinprick mosquito bite attacks and drone strike attacks right now? The pressure, of course, is on for this somehow counteroffensive. What do you think we're going to see?
Well, we know that the forces that were allocated for this offensive, and we know this not just from the leaked documents, but just because of public statements, 9 to 12 brigades worth of Ukrainian forces have been equipped and trained by NATO and their non-NATO European allies since the fall of last year, and that these brigades are, by and large, ready on paper. But as I mentioned to you, these brigades have incorporated a sustainability nightmare. You have different kinds of tanks, different kinds of armored fighting vehicles, different kinds of artillery, all of which have their own logistical tales. Each one which is different. I will tell you this: if the United States tried to carry out an offensive operation using 12 brigades that were organized in this fashion with differing equipment and support, we couldn't do it. And we're the best army in the world. We couldn't do it. Now we expect the Ukrainians somehow to be able to do this with troops that are not properly trained, they're not properly led, they're not properly motivated. We've taken them. It took me 2.5 years as a Marine working with the best people in the world. You have to constantly train to maintain this skill set. We've taken select Ukrainian forces and run them through a very shortened, abbreviated training course in Germany on combined arms combat. It's a joke, literally a joke. No American soldier could go through that training and be considered combat capable. And yet we've taken the Ukrainians, we've married them up with this disparate set of equipment, and we're saying you must now carry out a counteroffensive against an army that defines itself by the defense, and that's Russia, the Russian army, the best defensive army in the world. And so if everything was going Ukraine's way, this counteroffensive would have no chance of ever succeeding. But everything's not going their way. The Russians have, over the course of the year, mastered their intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities, their satellites, their aircraft, their electronic warfare. They are tracking this material and they are taking it out. All of the logistics support, the fuel, the ammunition, everything, spare parts that gets accumulated in warehouses These warehouses are being taken out. The Ukrainians have zero capacity to carry out any meaningful counteroffensive, and it's been hampered even more by the battle for Bakhmut. You know, the Russians killed 75,000 Ukrainians in this battle. I just want to make that number out there again so people understand what the heck just happened. 75,000 Ukrainian soldiers were killed. 60,000 of these soldiers were represents the size of the Ukrainian counteroffensive force. So the 60,000 troops that NATO trained for this counteroffensive are no longer available for the counteroffensive because 75,000 Ukrainians died in the Bakhmut area. These troops now have to fill that gap. There are no troops available for a meaningful counteroffensive. And if the Ukrainians attempt to do something to pull forces out, to cobble together some sort of desperate attack, it won't even be Battle of the Bulge like, because they won't get the penetration of the Russian lines. They'll be slaughtered before they get there, and then there's nothing left. And this is what the Ukrainian generals are trying to tell Zelensky right now: is stop playing politics with the lives of Ukrainian soldiers. You already did that in Bakhmut. We told you not to commit to this battle. 75,000 soldiers are dead. That's dead. That means about 150,000 are wounded. That's a lot of guys that are no longer available to be on the front lines fighting.
Jeez.
The Ukrainians are having trouble getting manpower. They're scooping old men. They're recruiting 16 and 17-year-olds. They're running around hijacking people off the streets. What do you think the motivation factor is of a man who thought he was going home to his family, getting hit, put in a car, thrown in 4 days later with no training, told you're going in the front line? You think he's ready to give his life for his country? He's going to, but he's not going to be able to give it in the way that the Ukrainians would like, with zeal and aggressiveness and going forward. He's going to give it cowering in a trench, saying, what the hell am I doing here? I don't know how to use this weapon. And the Russian artillery is raining down on me. The Ukrainians have no artillery ammunition left. Their air defense system is being destroyed as we speak. 2 of the 3 Patriot systems that have been provided are gone, off the table, not there anymore.
Jeez.
That's happening to the totality of the Ukrainian air defense. This war is all but over. There's a lot of fighting left to be done. But anybody who's waiting for a magical Ukrainian counteroffensive to suddenly turn the table, just like sanctions, it ain't working, guys. Russia has won this. We hear a lot of talk, the Ukrainians, they got new tanks. They didn't get any new tanks. The Challenger tanks provided by the British are old. The Leopard tanks provided by the Germans are old. You know what? The Russians right now are producing 100 advanced T-90 tanks a month. Wow. 100 a month. So while we're sitting, we're feral to give Ukrainians things. For F-16 fighters, 40-year-old aircraft. They're not new. They're not good. They're junk. And the aircraft the Ukrainians are going to get are all airplanes that have lost their operational expiration date. The Dutch were pretty much honest about it. They said, oh, we'll give you F-16s, but only after we can't use them anymore because they've passed their use-by date. Right. Then we'll give them to you. So this is the Ukrainian military with all these so-called magic weapons, none of which work. The Russians, everybody's saying, oh, they ran out of everything. They're not running out of anything. Their defense industry is mobilized. It's working. It's punching out stuff. They will never run out of missiles. They will never run out of artillery. They will never run out of tanks because, A, the Ukrainians aren't killing that many of them, and B, they're just building more and more and more. It's not just for Ukraine. People forget that Putin signed an order expanding the total Russian army to 1.5 million people. Finland, that just joined NATO, yeah, that's right, Finland. You got a 70,000-man Russian Army Corps being formed right now north of St. Petersburg. Fresh troops, fresh equipment, all because of you, Finland, because you decided to join NATO. They're going to be matched by another 30,000 up in the Kola Peninsula. That's 100,000 troops, Russian troops that didn't exist before. They exist now, and they're equipped with the best equipment in the world. And that goes for the totality of the Russian perimeter. This war has made Russia stronger militarily, economically, and most importantly, domestically, politically. I've never seen the Russian people so unified over being Russian than I saw them today.
And these leaders in the West continue to play politics with these people's lives, and these poor people continue to be killed. And now you're pulling young men out of colleges and off the streets in order to, in conscription, and throwing them into the meat grinder. Unbelievable. And I guess thanks, Joe Biden. And put that sticker right there for making Russia
Right
the
there.
strongest it's ever been. Scott Ritter, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your insights and what you saw on this month-long trip to Russia. Really, really fascinating. Eye-opening, I hope, for a lot of our audience who really have no idea what's going on inside of Russia. Scott, thank you so much for your insights on this.
Thanks for having me.
And it's just, thank you, Scott. It's just a story we don't see. I mean, it's in the West. We don't see this. We don't see the coverage at all because the mainstream media ignores what's actually happening.
I mean,
inside
a
Russia.
lot of times you do see in the Financial Times that, oh, you know, Russia has a really low interest rate right now. Russia has a low unemployment rate. They have, you know, record GDPs, with a caveat that it's just for now because sanctions are really going to start to take that away. Oh, sorry. What?
Yeah, I was just saying.
And so there's always like this, don't take this seriously couching of the way the West. And, you know,
Right.
we're not economists. So, you know, who are we to say?
But when you go there and physically see store shelves stocked with food, and I asked him, you know, I talked, you know, about the malls and like the crowds and that sort of thing. It's just really, really amazing to see that. Yeah, and one other thing I was going to say, and I can't remember. Oh, someone was saying in the chat, I just saw someone just said, you said it was over 6 months ago, Scott. And the point that I think he's been making and Colonel McGregor have been making is that it is over. Like now, all that's left is you're going to take 60,000 people, 60,000 Ukrainians, and you're just going to throw them into a meat grinder, and they're going to be killed. That's what's going to happen. It is over. Like it's all over. You heard Scott say it. It's all over, but the fighting. And you've heard that term time and time again. It's all over, but the fighting.
Yeah, it does seem like the boundary lines are drawn at this point, and this is where Russia intends to stay. And now we'll see, right? Because many people are saying, look, they were only coming in to surround the Donbass, the areas that were asking them for help.
Right.
They've done it. They're going to stay there. And, you know, this narrative that Putin's going to keep pushing towards Poland, going to take over Poland next and continue going west. Well, we'll see. Right now, we'll see.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.
Again, stupid autoplay. All right. I do agree. I don't necessarily support everything that those guys put out. And I still think that they are paid. But that was the best clip I found of the actual interview with Scott Ritter. So much I could say, so much that would land me in the shit. So I'm just going to be quiet, and I'll see you all over on Telegram at some point. That is the end of the show. Hopefully we'll see you all tomorrow. Hopefully on the same channel. If not, yeah, it's been put in chat a couple of times. If a bullshit main one that is out of jail 6 days. So we'll be back over there at that point. And thank you very much for joining, guys. And for anybody who hasn't caught up with us lately, we now have an end video, courtesy of our excellent friend of the channel, Mad Aussie. So I'll play that, and then we're done for the day. Be good, guys.